Menos mal que son graduables porque, claro, la vicelendakari
Thankfully,
somos de tamaños muy distintos.
you can change the height of the microphone because the deputy regional minister and myself are different in height. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Idoia, the Deputy First Minister, for introducing this event, and thanks to everybody for allowing me to come to it. It's the first time I'm here. What's more, it's a pleasure to be able to open this event, which is so important because it's dealing with the subject of the employment policy in our country. It's also a pleasure to be in this unique building, the Europe Conference Centre, and it's a benchmark for sustainable architecture in Spain. So that's a good reason to be here. I'm going to just share with you a few thoughts, and then I'll be able to respond if you have any questions. I've been told that there's going to be time for debate, and I want to actually go back to the words of those that spoke before me. In fact, the person hosting this event, the MC of this event, spoke about the fact that we've come to a time of change. Fortunately, we've left behind us now the worst part of the pandemic. Economic recovery seems to be doing well. It would seem that Spain is going to be a recovery, driving force for recovery in the coming years. That's probably because of the measures that were taken in March last year. But it's a time of uncertainty. Some of these uncertainties are disappearing and others are actually becoming clearer. So we've got a positive look towards recovery thanks to measures that were taken and that we had to deploy without any kind of a roadmap, without any kind of instruction manual, but with a very clear view of the fact that we needed to protect employment and family income, because it's far more efficient and far cheaper to protect something rather than letting something fall to pieces and then have to rebuild it. We've seen that over the last decade in Spain. I think we can feel satisfied for the work that we've done, for the responsible response that all institutions have made, that we've avoided a drop in GDP of over 25% and destroying over 3 million jobs, because that would have led to unpredictable, terrible consequences. So thanks to a coordinated response nationally and European-wide, and thanks to co-governance, the first time that I use this word that the Deputy Lendakari likes so much, thanks to co-governance with the, especially with the vaccination program, we're able to emerge from this crisis and from the previous financial crisis. Of course, the labour market is like the litmus test, where you can see whether the economy is recovering or not, because it's what really affects families and their ability to go back to a normal life and the ability to create opportunities for coming generations. October figures confirm the upward trend of the labour market. Social security membership is around 20 million. And workers on a furlough around now 140,000 people. That's the lowest level since the beginning of the pandemic. And in fact, there's an increase in the number, there's a decrease in the number of workers under furlough schemes in November. We've actually reached employment levels pre-pandemic, as opposed to the 12 years that we needed to recover from the previous economic crisis. In October, in the Basque Country, over 5,300 people joined the Social Security, started paying into Social Security, and over 1,000 people left unemployment. And as for people under furloughs. 95% of the people that had been in furlough schemes in the Basque Country have actually now returned to their jobs. And in fact, I'm sure this is a figures from October that they've probably improved over recent days. So recovery is up and running, but the challenge is that this isn't just a passing rebound, but that our rebound is transformative so that we can have sustainable growth in the medium term, fair recovery that affects all the members of the public, all territories, so that we increase our equality and the country improves. To do so, we've got a recovery plan. And in fact, that's going to allow over 140 billion euros from the public sector to be invested in employment policies between now and 2026. Whenever I give this figure, 140 billion euros, which is kind of out of reach for many of us to understand, I'd give you an idea that that is basically how much Spain has received in structural funds since it joined the European community. And we've all very aware of how much the country has progressed over the last 3 decades. So imagine what we can do if we use these funds well between now and 2026. In August, we actually received the first 9 billion. Last Friday, we asked for the next section, which is 10 billion euros. We've been the first country that's actually asked for this money because we're so far advanced in the plan. We've transferred much of this money already to autonomous regions so that they can use this money within their remit. So we're talking 9 billion euros that have been already transferred to autonomous regions. Every week when we hold the ministry board meeting, the Council of Ministers meeting, the cabinet meeting, we're going to be launching investments to drive forward and invest in science, R&D, the green transition, digitization, and reindustrialization of our country. When we talk about digitization, and as you know, this is one of the things my ministry is responsible for, which is going to be one of the levers for transforming employment and going to help youngsters in the future. We've set out plans for women entrepreneurs, money for startups in disruptive technologies. In fact, there are already 4 billion euros earmarked for them. Programs to expand broadband to 100% of the population by 2025. R&D in smart and artificial intelligence. And here in Bilbao, we've got the Secretary of State for Telecommunications, who's currently here today presenting the pilot projects for the Basque Country in 5G so that we can see use cases. In just 3 years, 5G has gone from being something that we think about for the future to actually see use cases, see specific use cases, especially in the field of industry, so as to be able to adapt in our country and still become leaders in the deployment of this kind of technology. We've also launched a program to create the first quantic supercomputer for the south of Europe. We've shown our interest in applying AI to neurotechnology to create in Spain an innovation ecosystem, which is going to be called Spain Neurotech, and so will become an international benchmark center in this field for the future. And I know that in the Basque Country you're very, very interested in this, because some of the companies here are able to lead these technologies for the future, but actually not so much the future, but even the present. We've also here something that we've done in the Basque Country, launched the first plan for economic structure and recovery, which is called a PERTE. This is for the connected electric vehicle. Tomorrow, the president of the government is going to present a second PERTE for avant-garde health, so that Spain is at the forefront of developing focused medicines, and also for fight against diseases, and this is going to help all the members of the public around the whole of Spain. We're also working in other PERTEs, in the farming field, aerospace industry, and the new economy of language. Areas in which Spain has a strong industry with a strong ecosystem and with a competitive edge over other countries, which makes us think that we can probably use these strengths to drive forward this structural transformation process at this time of change. Together with all these investments, we've also got a reform agenda on the table for reforming the education sector, the vocational education and training sector, which is so important for us. VET in the Basque Country is an example of a dual VET, and this combination of working and learning as well. There's also going to be a law for startups called ICREA and CRECE to improve the business climate in our countries, the law for climate change, the first law on housing in our history, and of course reform of pensions, and the reform which is going to be perhaps spoken about in more detail over the next couple of days, which is the labour market reform. We're at a decisive stage in social dialogue. We've concentrated on social dialogue, and we will do so. We've always done that right from the moment. What we're interested in here, and the title of this conference sees that, which is employment, which is inclusive, and a new social contract, which just goes to show the intense dialogue we have with social partners, because this is closely linked to the values that we are promoting in the government in Spain. Our goal is to Europeanize the labour market in Spain. We want a labour market that does away with precariousness, improves job quality, improves investment in human capital, and improve the competitiveness of our companies. And to do that, we need an employment framework which goes alongside this recovery plan, this idea of a Green Deal and a recovery of the employment, which will allow this economic cycle, which is now beginning, also is a stage of transformation and creating quality employment, and we said allows us to solve and correct all the structural imbalances that we have suffered from in our country for decades now. I think that the recovery plan, which should be on the up to cruising speed by 2022, will give us the possibility, together with these investments, to move forward and carry on transforming and modernizing our country and our productive model. So the goal is actually not to return to the situation that existed pre-pandemic, but rather return to this path for growth and improvement that has existed since we became a democratic country again, but which was cut off right again in the 2008 economic and financial crisis. So we need to do that, the support of all institutions at all different public administration and government levels in the country, and of course we need the collaboration of social partners and moreover the private sector. Both large companies and SMEs and the self-employed, who are at the heart of our economy. We all need to be rowing in the same direction to get the most from this recovery plan, and for our country to take a sustainable, more inclusive and fairer growth path, as I said this morning. Because if something that has shown us the pandemic is the need to collaborate, cooperate, and work together, and to share the responsibility that we all have for getting into this new economic stage, which is now beginning with co-responsibility, with commitment, co-governance, which is my favorite expression now, with dialogue. But I'd also like to finish on the final word with trust. I think we should trust ourselves. We should be self-confident. Spain is a fantastic country. It's reached achievements that it never thought were possible in the last 40 years since democracy came to the country. And I think once again we can set an example, show that we can work together, make use of opportunities and become an example of how we can get a digital green re-industrialization which is not only strong, sustainable, fair, and a recovery that reaches all corners of the population and more specifically generates opportunities for a better future for the upcoming generations. Thank you so much once again, eskerrik asko, and I wish you a very happy working day. I'll leave you with that thought in mind. Thank you so much.
Si me lo permite, yo voy a aprovechar.
It's okay with you. I'm going to just make one use of the fact that you're here because we've got a few minutes. Now that we've got you, and I'm a journalist here too, can I ask you a couple of questions? It would seem that all institutions are aligned if that's what the institutions had as their goal. You've all repeated and you've spoken about co-governance, dialogue and trust. You added this third word that should be taken into account when we draw conclusions from this conference, which is still beginning. You've spoken about plans and projects, but what does plans of the government have to improve the business climate and encourage creation of jobs? Well, I think actually all of our recovery plan is very much focused on this goal, improving the business climate and create quality employment. But there's no magic wand that can allow us to follow a path that actually creates quality employment. But what I think is true is we're going to be emerging from this crisis far in a different way than the way that we emerged from the previous financial crisis that led to what we could call the working poor and a deterioration of equality and the reappearance of poverty amongst children. I think a wealthy country such as Spain, a strong country, a country in which the majority of the population is progressive, that wants a better, fairer future, a country such as Spain can't just forget these issues if we're going to have a sustained growth in the medium term. To do so, there's a whole series of reforms, which includes the driving forward of company creation, business creation, the reform of the bankruptcy laws so that the economy isn't affected so much by companies going bankrupt, so that they can recover as well. The reform of the energy situation, the public system, our welfare state, and of course the labour market reform. And all of these reforms have this dual goal. As I said earlier, we've got an extraordinary opportunity at the moment because we're going to be able to accompany all of this agenda, all of these plans with 140 billion euros between now and 2026. And I trust that because we've done that in the future. Spain is a success case. It's a model for success in the use of structural funds because all of those of us that have got a certain age now have seen how our country has changed over the last 4 decades. And I think we need to trust that we're able to do that again in the future if we make use of this historical opportunity. You're not just a ministry for the economy, but for digital transformation. You've spoken about some of the plans that you've got in the ministry, and you've also spoken about the working poor and the dual nature of the labour market, the conditions for employment today and how they existed in the past. How can digitization be used? How can this digital technological transformation that we're facing now, that we will be facing in the future, how can it be used to create quality jobs? Digitization was actually already a reality before the pandemic, has been stepped up during the time of the pandemic, and we've all seen that. We've all gone from using screens to have fun, to play with our children, to using screens for social relations. We've had to use these new technologies to retain these social relations, and we've increased in just a few months in digitization what previously would have taken us years. And that just goes to show actually the bottleneck in the supply of chips, because demand for these new digital products have increased so much that actually what we have in our hands now are little chips surrounded by something. Services are more digitized. Industry is now a symbiosis between traditional industry, and we see that in the Basque industrial sector, for example, in machine tools and health. But in this digital change, which has been so fast, we in the public administrations, but not us, all of society, including the private sector, needs to speed up the upskilling and the adaptation of our workers and our productive fabric and the whole of the public. So that's why within this recovery plan, a third of the resources during the first stage of this plan, that's 20 billion euros, to drive forward the digital transformation of a country, but from a humanist viewpoint. We're not just talking here about artificial intelligence in industry or R&D and 5G, 6G, the arrival of 5G. It's not just that. It's also a matter of digitizing our SMEs. Before the end of this year, we'll be launching a very ambitious program of investment, the first stage of which will be given 500 million euros to digitize our companies, but also digital skills for the whole of the population. And this is a field in which co-governance at different levels of government is key. As has already been said this morning quite clearly, the Spanish government can transfer resources, launch programs nationally to drive forward digital skills amongst the population, but quite clearly autonomous regions also have a remit in this field, as do provincial councils, city councils, the ones that are closest to the public. They have a key role to play, because it's not just a matter of the digital skills of graduates or engineers or that have got doctorates. No, of the whole population, of the whole of the education system, especially the more vulnerable groups of people, the elderly, those that are socially excluded, marginalized, because increasingly to access certain public services, you're going to need these digital skills. That's why there's a specific component to a plan called Component 19 for digital skills to make sure that this digital-based reindustrialization is also the way that we can create quality employment and increase the competitiveness of our companies. The same goes for the green transformation. We're undergoing a major period of transformation. It's a key moment. I spoke about the opportunity that that presents us with, but it's also a challenge. There's no doubt about it. Let's not pull the wool over our eyes. All of society, all of public administrations, and it's unprecedented. Fortunately, I think we've got the tools, the means to do so, and the Spanish government, and I think the Spanish population, is determined to make use of this opportunity to build a better future for the youngest. There's another adjective that you mentioned, a humanist, digital technological transformation, which is humanist. It's 10:40. I think we've imposed upon you sufficiently. Thank you so much for coming to accompany us in the opening ceremony of this conference, because you've spoken about something that we're going to be talking about during the rest of this conference, especially the first of these challenges, which is inclusive employment. NADIA CALVIño, Deputy President of the Spanish government, Minister for Employment and Digitization, thank you for coming.
Gracias.